Through the first 2 weeks of the college football campaign, the underdogs hold a slight edge against the odds makers, going 45-41 against the spread. 19 of those puppies have won outright, and double-digit favorites who historically have been money in the bank in the season's opening weeks, a pedestrian 28-25 ATS, 8 of them losing outright, including Michigan State, Oklahoma State, Tennessee, and UAB last Saturday. Now guys, I can tell you that is shocking, considering last year in the season's first 2 weeks, those double-digit chalks combined to go 31-13 versus the odds makers. And this year, the first 2 weeks, there are only 3 games over 500. Hi guys, Hal DeMarco here, General Manager and Lead Handicapper for the world's largest online sports handicapping community. And every single weekend this fall, I'll be right here giving you free college and pro football winners. I've got free picks coming up in just a moment on Northwestern Syracuse, West Virginia Auburn, and Southern Miss Virginia. But first, I wanted to talk a little gambling strategy with you. You know, 2 of the most important angles to consider when it comes to handicapping college football: the look ahead and the letdown factors. Let's take a look at some of today's examples. First, the look-ahead situations. Purdue hosting Northern Illinois. Boilermakers last week losing at Oregon 38-36, a game in which they outplayed Oregon but still suffered the loss. Now they're back at home. Don't for a minute think that they don't have their eyes cast forward to next week's battle with Notre Dame. Now, they've covered just 3 of their last 8 versus the Mid-American Conference. Meanwhile, MAC teams 13-5 ATS versus the Big Ten the past 2 seasons. And how about South Carolina? Very difficult spot for Steve Spurrier's crew. The Gamecocks returning home after that 41-37 loss to Georgia last week. Now they should rebound very easily against a bad Florida Atlantic team that's 1-11 against the spread in its last 12 non-conference road games. But they've got a huge Thursday night game, short week of preparation time coming up against Ole Miss. That's coming up next. The good news though, South Carolina on 7-3 ATS runs as a home favorite and as a double-digit home chalk. Here's one you probably never thought about: Arizona State hosting UL Monroe, another cupcake for the Sun Devils, who opened the season with a 50-3 rout of Idaho State. Don't be surprised, though, if Dennis Erickson's crew doesn't get caught looking ahead to next week's game at Georgia, Sun Devils' first real test of the season. Finally, Penn State hosting Temple. No big deal for the Lions. They've won the last 3 games in this series by a combined 123-3 score. But they've got a monster revenge game against Iowa next week in Happy Valley. Good news for the Lions: they're on a 19-8 ATS run as a double-digit favorite. Bad news for the Lions: they're 0-2 in that role this year. Now let's take a look at some teams in a classic letdown situation. How about Michigan? Coming off that huge last-minute win against Notre Dame. How do the Wolverines cover this big post against Eastern Michigan? Now, true, they've covered their last 4 games after playing the Irish the past 4 years, but remember 2 years ago when these 2 last met? Michigan only won by 11, laying 29 points. And a thrilling finish to last week's Southern Cal-Ohio State game, but both teams very difficult spots today. Trojans just 1-6 ATS in their last 7 Pac-10 road openers as they head to Washington. Meanwhile, the Buckeyes battling Toledo in Cleveland. They're 2-9 ATS in their last 11 games versus Ohio-based Mid-American Conference teams. Toledo coming off that big win against Colorado. Finally, Iowa pummeled Iowa State last week. Today, Hawkeyes taking on Arizona at home, but the big game for Iowa is next week's visit to Penn State. Keep in mind, by the way, that Arizona 14-8 ATS run as an underdog. Now, let's get today's first free pick, Northwestern at Syracuse. Wildcats really struggled to get to 2-0 on the season last week, just barely beating Eastern Michigan 27-24. That's a team that lost the previous week at home to Army. But this is one of those games, guys, I always tell you have to dig a little deeper and look into the box score, because in reality, Northwestern was up 21-0 early in this game before relaxing, before needing a field goal with 6 seconds left to play to win it. Consequently, you are getting tremendous value in this line because of their collapse. Let's take advantage of it. Listen, last year, Northwestern won 30-10 to a snap, a 4-game series skid against the Orangemen, who last week, as a 29.5-point road dog, lost at Penn State 28-7. Previous week, they opened up at home and overtime lost to Minnesota, a game they should have won. Either way, it doesn't matter. I say go with Northwestern. If this price goes to 3.5, you buy down the half point. A little bit of insurance. Next up, Auburn at home against West Virginia. Revenge situation for the Tigers. Remember last year, up 10-0 early eventually lost 34-17. Auburn off to a 2-0 start already this season. 37-13 beat LA Tech. 49-24 beat up Mississippi State last Saturday. No look-ahead spot for Auburn. They only have Ball State next, so they win this game. They're off to a 4-0 start this season before they hit SEC play. First two games of the season, the offense is clicking, 1,045 yards. Their top two running backs, Ben Tate and Ontario McCaleb, 271 yards. They combined for against Mississippi State. They combined for 265 yards against Louisiana Tech. Now, West Virginia did beat Liberty. Big deal. They beat East Carolina last week, but they really struggled against the Pirates. Only won 35-20, committed 11 penalties in that game, turned the ball over 4 times. That does not bode well when you are now taking on the road, visiting Auburn with a quarterback making his first road start. Again, I say you buy insurance. If you have 7.5 in this game, buy down the hook so you're only laying a touchdown with the host Auburn Tigers. Last game, Virginia and Southern Mississippi. Cavaliers, they opened up the season losing to William and Mary. Bill and Mary beat them 26-14. In that game, they only had 268 total yards and they committed 7 turnovers. Last week, not much better. 30-14 loss against TCU. They only had 7 first downs versus 23 by the Horned Frogs. They only had 177 total yards. Both their TDs came in the fourth quarter when that game was well out of reach. First game against William and Mary, they rotated 3 quarterbacks. Their primary quarterback, though, last week, and the guy who's played most this season, Sewell, well, he's been sacked 9 times in 2 games, and he's been picked off 4 times. Now, a lot of people will look at this big line and they'll say, well, how do you lay these points with Southern Mississippi when the Golden Eagles only managed to get by Central Florida last week, 26-19 at home? Guys, again, you have to look at the box score. Southern Mississippi dominated Central Florida between the 20s last week. Total yardage, they had an advantage of 409 to 194. Here's a great trend for you. Southern Mississippi, 14-1 against the spread in the season's 3rd game the past 15 years. Damian Fletcher, their outstanding running back, he is powering a ground game that's averaged 265 yards on the ground in the first 2 games of the season. Austin Davis, their quarterback, he is leading an offense that has averaged 39 points and 507 yards in the first 2 games of the season. Meanwhile, Virginia's Al Groh, 16-27 against the spread on the road so far during his career in Charlottesville, 2-6 ATS his last 8 road openers. Go ahead, lay the big number with Southern Mississippi. But remember, as I always tell you about these free picks, they're good selections, but they're not my strongest selection of the day. They're just a little bit flawed. But for the best bet, I found the one game on today's card that stands out head and shoulders above all others, the one game that's worth playing, and it's the one game where I believe the odds makers have seriously undervalued the favorite. In fact, I believe the line in this game is off by at least 6 points. Now, last year was my 7th straight winning NFL and college football campaign, a season in which I went 3-0 with my highest-rated college football releases, capping the year by hitting the BCS title game for the 10th time in 11 seasons, thanks to Florida. Don't miss my college mismatch game of the year play, my first 10-dime release of the college football season. It's available now. Keep in mind, guys, the entire baseball season. During the summer, I only had 3 10-dime releases, won them all. If you're playing just one game today, make it this game. I'm telling you, it's the best bet on the board. Good luck today. I'll catch you again tomorrow right here with my free NFL picks.